and welcome back to Startup Stories. This is episode 2 of season 2, and we're super excited to have you back. This is Randy from Fireside Instruments.
Hey,
Yeah,
thanks for having me.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. When you messaged and asked if I'd like to do it, I actually got pretty excited. I was like, yeah.
Good. I'm glad. So tell me a little bit about your business and what you do. It's pretty interesting.
Fireside Instruments. So we build stringed instruments, mostly guitars, ukuleles, built a bouzouki, built a few other stringed instruments like a tenor guitar and some other variants of guitars. That's about the variety of what we offer right now.
Mm-hmm. And everything is handcrafted?
Yeah. Just starting to dip into the electric side of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have a CNC that we recently brought into the shop. So the electrics are much more, they're better when they're built off of a CNC because it's always the exact same. Your specs are always the same. Mm-hmm. There's very little you can actually do on a CNC for an acoustic instrument. So yeah.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit of like how you got into all of this. Like, was it two separate passions that kind of came together? Was it a hobby? How did you start off with this?
Well, kind of a really long story, and I'll try and keep it fairly short.
Oh, it's okay. We got time.
Like, I've always had a passion for music, always. Mm-hmm. Not much of a musician, never have been, but I like to play a little bit here and there for fun and, dabble into it. And of all the stringed instruments, I really like the bass guitar. It's always kind of been a passion of mine. I like getting into that mix and playing that rhythm end of things. But even from a really young age, like I used to drive my parents crazy because I was always tapping and they'd look at me like, "Well, you quit tapping," right? Like couldn't tell you how many hundreds of times I've probably heard that in my life. So anyway, I started probably 8-10 years ago. I got back into bass from being away from music for a long time, from playing anyway. I bought a bass and started playing again, and I've always wanted a bass built on a Telecaster body, but nobody really builds one, so I decided I'd give it a go. And I mean, I was like, oh, how hard can it be, right? And I mean, worst case scenario, I just made some really expensive firewood. But, thankfully it actually turned out really well. And so, that's kind of where it started. And I mean, it was never an intention to build anything for anybody else. It was, just I was building this for myself. And I learned about cigar box guitars and went, hey, these are kind of neat and fun. And so I started building those. And, then, of course, friends learned about them and family and stuff. And everyone's like, hey, could you build me one? I'm like, sure, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm sure many luthiers have a very similar story. I started building those, and then I got into building ukuleles. And from there, I actually took a guitar building course and moved up into tenor guitars and other 6 strings, and like I said, I've built a bouzouki now as well. And I've started doing a lot of restorations and doing a lot of maintenance work and stuff on guitars for people. And I never intended to go into that at all. It wasn't an intention, but the odd guy would reach out and go, hey man, I got this issue with my guitar, can you have a look at it? I'm like, bring it on over, right? And eventually, I guess my name just started to get out there, and suddenly it went from maybe this is like a business, and kind of had to okay, maybe I need to start looking at the legal side of this, and what do I actually need to do, and talk to an accountant and stuff. And so and actually that's where startup really came in to help me. So I had to come get some advice, really, because it was like, I don't know where to take this, right? So but anyway, my background is I made a career in construction for many years, did an awful lot of finish work and fine carpentry and kitchens and all that stuff. So the woodworking side of this came pretty easy for me. And the luthier side of it, I'm very mechanically inclined, and I think very linear. So even the luthier side of it came pretty quick as well. So,
That's so cool, because it definitely takes an exceptional level of craftsmanship to make one of these.
There's no such thing as good enough or close enough. It's either there or it's not, right? So I mean, if you're setting the intonation on a guitar, I mean, we're talking fractions of a millimeter, and it just doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah, there's definitely a form of precision that has to be there. So
how long does it take you to build an acoustic guitar? Like,
well, it really depends a lot on the amount of detail you want in a guitar, right? So a standard 6-string would probably 60, 70, 80 hours.
wow.
In that range. I've literally had some, though, that were well over 100, like 120, 130 hours
Yeah.
into one guitar, just with the amount of detail
Wow.
that's gone into it. So, yeah, we're talking some pretty fine woods, you know, a lot of the details, and you get into bindings and purflings and stuff, and that might be a little bit over some people's heads, but we're talking strips of wood that are only 0.5 millimeter thick.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, very fine details.
That's crazy. I know I took a shop class in high school for like 3 years, and I'm like, yeah, here's a stool. So I wouldn't even imagine like building something like this. Like, that's crazy. Yeah.
But I mean, you don't have to start at those. I mean, you probably wouldn't start at that type of detail. You keep it as simple as possible, right? So, I mean, I know lots of luthiers who are just starting, and I mean, I really, in the luthier world of things, people look at me as I'm just starting, right? You know, but I know people who have never really done much woodworking, and, you know, they're taking a go at it. And I mean, if you don't have the woodworking background, to get that first can be tough, right?
Yeah, yeah. So what are your favorite details to do on your guitars? Like, do you have anything that's very like niche to how you build them, like almost like a little trademark?
Well, my sound hole and my headstock designs are my own. They're not the norm from anywhere. And in the realm of headstocks, that's where, like, looking across the industry, a headstock is a headstock, and everybody tries to make their own design, but there's only so many ways you can change a headstock because your geometry still has to work, right? And so to try and create something different that somebody else hasn't already done is almost impossible.
Yeah.
So this headstock has literally taken me 5 years
Wow.
to come up with one that I'm like, I really like this, and it's a little bit different, right? So yeah, and my sound hole design isn't your standard circle, which is what most of them are.
Yeah.
Right? So the new ones, now have this new design, which is a little bit different, and I get compliments on them all the time from musicians and dealers and retailers. They see this and they're like, wow, this is really different. And you got to be careful when you make those changes, because you never know how it's going to affect the sound. I mean, we can make an educated guess knowing on the geometry of what we're creating and the capacity of the body. So you've got a pretty good educated guess, but every piece of wood reacts different, and you know, every shape is going to react a little bit different. So you truly don't know until you make it, and then you're like, fingers crossed, hopefully it sounds good, right?
Yeah.
And so far they've been winners. So
yeah, you've never had to do any like has it been a lot of trial and error, or has it been like pretty good right off the hop?
It's been more a lot of pre-work.
Yeah.
You know, like it's
measure twice, cut once.
well, yeah, and you know what? I work in Fusion 360 for design, and for those who don't know what Fusion 360 is, it's a program by AutoCAD, by Autodesk, who makes AutoCAD.
Okay.
And so it's 3D modeling software, and it really helps. It's pretty big, steep learning curve to learning Fusion 360. In relation, it's like basically one step down from full-on AutoCAD.
Okay.
So yeah, it's pretty robust software, you know, but you spend an awful lot of time in there just figuring the software out. And then to actually create stuff in there takes time as well.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, again, you can do all the engineering and all the calculations and everything you want, and until it's on an instrument, you just don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
And all of that work, is that on top of the 80 hours?
Oh
that
yeah,
it takes?
that's not included
Oh,
at all.
wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
no.
So with that included, how long do you think it would?
I couldn't even fathom to guess.
Yeah.
I really couldn't, honestly. As an example, I've got a short scale bass guitar right now that I've got almost finished. And the time wise for the physical building, because the CNC did a lot of work, I'm probably going to be in that 50, 60 hour range. So it's a little better.
Yeah.
But the creation time in Fusion was literally months, right? Because I'm pretty picky on how I do this. And like even the body was tweaked, I couldn't tell you how many times. And then the headstock design and the headstock geometry was all tweaked. I don't know, at least a dozen times. Like that headstock has changed so many times, and now that it's where it is, I'm like, yeah, and it's something very different too. So in the coming weeks, maybe month, I'll be releasing this new bass, and the people who have seen it are like, wow, man, I can't wait to try it. Yeah, so it's something different, and it's kind of cool.
Exciting. So earlier, before we started filming the podcast, for the people that are watching and listening, we were talking about like how musicians play instruments and how you know if they like them or not.
Yeah.
And so do you want to tell me a little bit about the SCMA Awards that were just here in Lloyd and how the musicians reacted to playing your guitars in the green room?
Yeah, the SCMAs were an amazing event. Like a tip of the hat to the Vic Juba. Those guys are amazing. Jen, Jason, Andy, all the crew, like they're just an amazing crew to work with. And so anyway, the minute I heard about the SCMAs, I was like, I gotta be a part of this. So I reached out and went, hey, how can I help, right? And so anyway, did lots of work with the Vic Juba to help out and be part of the behind the scenes. Had a booth at Bud Miller, you know, for that fest.
For the market?
Yeah, for the market, and had a lot of musicians come by and check out stuff. And what you find is that the biggest compliment as a luthier you're ever going to get is when a musician picks up your instrument and doesn't really say a word, and they just start playing, and they keep playing and keep playing. And it's almost like the conversation stops completely, and they just get immersed in the instrument.
Just absolute tunnel vision.
Yeah, and you know, after a while, they just kind of stop and look at you, and they're just like, wow, man, you know. And so that is the best. It's when you hand an instrument to a musician, he plays it for like 10, 15, 20 seconds and hands it back and doesn't say a word. It's like he didn't like it, right? You know, but I've got a couple of features on this that are not the norm. The arm bevel, people make lots of compliments about the arm bevel I've got there, because if you're one of those guys who rests the arm on the body, it really does dig into your forearm. And with this arm bevel, it's so comfortable. And people start playing, and then they realize, whoa, wait now, right? Yeah. And, you know, my neck design is a little bit different. And I'm not saying it's for everybody, because it's, you know, like we talked about earlier, do you like a Ford, a Toyota, a GM? What do you like, right?
Yeah, it's subjective.
Yeah. So, I mean, but the vast majority of the musicians who picked it up went, that neck is really different, but it is so comfortable, right? So, yeah, I mean, I had one guy out of everybody who played it all weekend, just the one who went, that's different and interesting, not my forte, you know, it's not what I prefer. And I'm like, that's okay, right? And I mean, it's a neck. I mean, you know, that's the great thing about a custom guitar, is the fact that how you like your neck is how I can carve it for you, right?
Exactly.
You know, if you want the body a certain size, if you like the nut width to be a certain distance, if you like your scale length to be a certain length, I mean, we can make all those adjustments for you, right? Yeah. It's not like you're walking into a store and going, here's a Telecaster, or, you know, here's a Gibson or a Gretsch or whatever, right? Yeah. You know, you get what you get. On a custom guitar, we can make all those tweaks, right? So, yeah.
That's so cool. That is so cool. Another thing that I want to talk about with your guitars and the SCMAs is how one was actually played on stage. Yeah. During the kickoff concert. Do you want to tell everyone a little bit about that?
Sure. That was actually an awesome experience. I had just come back from the market. Jason meets me at the door as I'm trying to load the gear in, because I wanted to make sure there was some gear there for the guys to practice with and enjoy and try them out. And, you know, Josh had been on stage in sound check, and his Martin broke, and he was like devastated. He didn't have another guitar. They didn't have one available for him. So they're like, hey, you mind if Josh plays this? And I'm like, no, by all means, right? So it wasn't even ready for stage because it didn't have strap buttons on it yet. So I quickly ran home, grabbed a strap button, grabbed the drill, and within 10 minutes had it ready for him, right? You know, not a big deal, but you know, anyway, they were pretty excited. And Josh played it through the sound check and really liked it. The sound guys are like, this thing balances so nice on the system. And so anyway, after the concert, I just happened to be backstage, and Josh actually came up to me and he's like, man, I love that guitar. It plays so nice. It plays so smooth. And, the sound through the system was fantastic. I actually had a couple of musicians who had tried my guitars earlier in the day, and they messaged me over Instagram.
Oh,
and
nice.
and they're like, dude, the sound of this thing through the PA system was just phenomenal, right? There was a few other guitars on stage, and I won't put anybody's guitars down by any means, because it's all subjective, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, like even the sound guys were like, your guitar through that PA system was the best one of the weekend, right? So like, the musicians messaged me and they're like, man, that thing sounds phenomenal through a PA. And an acoustic isn't the best instrument to try and put through a PA.
Yeah.
It just doesn't sound, normally it doesn't sound as good as, when it's not, right? But they were all incredibly impressed with how well that sound came through the PA.
Yeah, that's amazing how Josh Stump said that, especially because he's kind of up and coming
Yeah.
here in the country music scene. And
Yeah,
everything.
quite talented for sure.
Yeah, that's such a cool experience. I know I saw the whole thing happen, and I'm taking pictures. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
No, that was so sweet. So, as far as the entrepreneurial side of things go with Fireside Instruments, what kind of hurdles or roadblocks obstacles have you had to overcome?
The biggest one is brand recognition, because let's face it, who's Randy Glynn and who's Fireside Instruments, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows who Gibson, Taylor, Fender, Gretsch, Guild. Everybody knows those names. They've been around forever. To try and break into that industry is incredibly tough. Incredibly tough. So to get out there and create a brand, that is definitely the biggest hurdle any luthier is going to face.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, the building isn't easy. It takes a lot of time, and there's not a big payback to it, not for a very long time.
Yeah.
But it's more of a passion thing really than anything. I love doing this. I really do. I love building guitars. And I still have that fear that one day someone's going to pick up their guitar and go, man, this is what I paid for? This isn't great.
Well, you haven't had that happen.
No,
so that means that your stuff is amazing. But I
Yeah.
understand what you mean by that, because you're always your harshest critic, right?
Yeah. And there's always that fear the first time you put strings on a guitar and you put the tension to it, and the wood still doesn't know it's a guitar. So the wood still thinks it's a tree, right?
Yeah.
To start that break-in period and what's it going to sound like, right?
Yeah, you're just sitting there please sound good.
Yeah, right. And I've got one in the shop right now that I've never attempted before, and I had an idea, and I'm building a baritone ukulele for a local company here in town, and I reached out to them and I've got an idea. I was like, how do you feel about me building an 8-string baritone ukulele?
Wow.
And they're like, a what? Right? They're like, and so I explained my idea and how I do it. They're like, that sounds amazing. Let's do it. Right?
Yeah.
And so I'd say in the next 2 weeks, it'll be ready.
Nice.
Yeah, it's already strung up and it's starting to come around and the tension's on it, and still needs some tweaking, but that's like anything when you first build it. So.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm excited for it. I'm gonna stay tuned, everyone. Everyone, stay tuned for 2 weeks. You're gonna see it.
Yeah, pretty quick.
Yeah. So you were a startup client before I worked here. So I actually don't know much about your whole startup and Fireside. How did all of that happen? What was the kind of process for you?
So of course, like I said, this was never really intended to be a business. Excuse me. It was just something, I'll call it a hobby. And most people will still probably refer to me as just a hobbyist. But it started getting to the point where I was busier and busier and busier. And I'm like, maybe I need to start actually talking to an accountant or someone. And I was like, well, okay, I need to figure out how to do this. And I was like, okay, startup would be a great great bunch of people to talk to. So I reached out and had a conversation, went, this is where I am with this. Where should I go? Because I had no idea. And yeah, so I reached out and we had a couple of meetings and got some help and got some pointers. And yeah, it was amazing. Great group of people, very helpful. I mean, guys like me don't know where to start this. And
it's tough because like it's those things where like you don't really know where to go, what to do, unless you have someone like leading you through everything, right? Like it's hard to figure out yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was really hoping not to miss something and later on being like, oh God,
I need that.
I needed this 2 years ago. Like, you know, so.
Yeah. And it's always better like with a business having everything prepared beforehand and then you're all ready to go instead of like going and doing something and you're realizing, oh no, this just happened. I should have really had this in hindsight. And then, So I'm glad that we could help you out.
Startup has been amazing. Yeah, they're a great group of people, very helpful. So
So did you meet with Holly, our business coach?
Yep.
Yeah. Holly's lovely. She's so knowledgeable with everything. Yeah. Did you do like a business model canvas and everything? Or did she mostly do like referrals to people?
Mostly it was referrals, you know, because I just needed to know all those bits and pieces. Where do I have to go? Who do I need to talk to? You know, bits like that, right? So yeah, the guidance was probably the biggest thing I needed. Is like I was trying to make sure that I just didn't miss something, right? And I'm sure I still probably missed something, but you know.
But you missed less if you did.
Probably a lot less. Yeah. You know, it made that road nice and streamlined compared to how I'm sure I would have been all over the place, right? Trying to figure my way through this.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm so glad that we could help you out with all of that.
Yeah,
like
very appreciative.
At Startup, our thing is to help businesses start, learn, grow, and thrive. So I'm happy that we were able to help you like start and learn, and clearly you're growing and thriving now because you're doing great and you're building all of these amazing things. And
5 years now, well, just about 5 years, and just over 40 instruments. So, considering this is just a part-time gig because it's not my daily job for sure, and I've got like lots of service work coming through the door as well. You know, I've had a couple of one of the instruments I had, which is probably one of the coolest ones, was a 1924 Gibson mandolin that came in for a complete restoration. It was in pretty rough shape, and by the time I finished with it and sent the people off with it, they were just tickled pink. Yeah, it sounded great. It looked great. It was amazing.
I need to get you to fix my guitar. My guitar's giving me issues right now, so now I know who to give it to.
There's one of the pieces for like a luthier that I would give any advice to anybody who plays guitar is I see an awful lot of instruments come through the door that are just not set up properly, and they're very difficult to play when they're not, right? And so as an example, if you have a budget of $1,000, I'm going to buy a nice guitar. I've got a budget of $1,000. Well, spend probably $750 to $800 on the guitar, and then bring that guitar to a reputable luthier and have him set it up properly for you, and it'll make a world of difference. Like I've had brand new Gibsons come through the door, Gibsons, Martins, Ibanez come through the door, brand spanking new, and just horrible to play.
Which, for the listeners that don't really know much about guitars, those are like big brands, like expensive. Yeah,
we're not talking a $500 instrument. We're talking $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 instruments that played not great.
Yeah.
Right? Like played very poorly, to be honest.
Like not their fullest potential. Right.
Well, I actually had an Ibanez bass come through the shop. The guy had just bought it at a big box store, and like it was around the Christmas rush, and they told him, we don't have time to set this up for you. And it literally wasn't even playable. Like we're talking an almost $4,000 bass that wasn't playable.
Wow.
Right? So he brought it over, and you know, probably an hour to an hour and a half, I did a complete setup on it and had him out the door, and that thing played great.
Good.
Right?
Good.
So I mean, just a little bit of money to go towards actually setting something up properly, you know, makes a world of difference.
Yeah, and the nice thing is with your guitars and all the instruments that you make, like it has that personal touch to it. It has that
Yeah.
care. Like these are your babies, right? Like.
And you know what? I love working with my clients. I really do, because I've had so many clients that they have their own story. Like every one of them has a story on what this guitar or ukulele or whatever means to them, right? I have one lady, she calls her guitar Pearl, and she loves that thing, and she's so amazing.
Yeah.
You know, I have another guy who I built one for, and he's Carol Ann, and you know, like my wife called this one Fortune.
Nice.
So yeah, everybody kind of has this story of their idea of what their instrument is, and the fact that I can help them bring that to life, it just, you know, and to see the reaction from them when they bring it in is just amazing.
Yeah, it just makes your heart happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so amazing. So for those who want to find you on social media or in the community, what are your like social media handles or websites? Like what,
Yeah,
what
so
do you have?
I have a website, firesideinstruments.ca. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook are the two biggest ones. Again, Fireside Instruments. I also have a TikTok account. I'm not on there much because I find it difficult to create TikToks from doing what I'm doing. And to be honest, I'm not great with social media because when I get digging into working on a guitar, my brain just is like, I've like got blinders on,
Like
right?
hyper-focused,
And
yeah.
like I'm into it and then I stop and go, I didn't take one picture, video, nothing, right? And I'm like, yeah, so I'm not great with social media. I try to put a lot of information out there. I try to put a lot in there of how I build and how I do things, you know, because I do have quite a few people who've reached out to me and said, you know what, I really don't have any musical interest at all when it comes to this stuff, but I love watching what you do, right?
Yeah.
It's just, you know, a lot of people find it fascinating, you know, so anyway, I mean, you can reach out to me just about any way at all. Social media is perfectly fine. That's how actually the most of my sales have gone. Right, is over social media. So
Yeah, and so the people that buy your guitars, are they mostly like local people or a bit from all over the place, surrounding areas?
the furthest I've shipped one so far has been out to Quebec.
Wow.
I've shipped quite a few actually out to BC. But yeah, locally for Alberta and Saskatchewan would definitely be the vast majority, you know.
That's amazing
So-
though, how you kind of have them like all
Yeah.
over Canada.
Yeah.
How,
So
how does that feel? Like there's people around the country that are playing your instruments.
it's actually really cool, you
Right.
know. So, but I see the other side as well in the fact that I've built a guitar for a company, and it was for their 30th anniversary, and I do know that guitar is going to be a wall hanger for most of its life. Thankfully, there are some people in the company who do play, and they're like, "No, man, we'll be taking that thing down," right? You know, but you know, it's really cool. I mean, it's great that I built it, and I think it's really cool that, you know, they came to me and went, "Hey, we'd love you to do this for our 30th anniversary." So that was really cool, you know. But yeah, in all honesty, seeing Josh on the stage playing my guitar, doing his thing, that was great.
Like almost brought a tear to the eye.
Yeah, it's amazing, like, right?
Yeah. And then also, before we finish up with this episode, I want you to tell me a little bit about the merch that you brought, what we have on the table here. For those that are listening, we'll explain it, but for those that are watching, you can see it on the table with us.
Yeah, so with the SAMAs coming up, I was asked if I could help out with the swag bags, and I'm like, sure, I'll figure something out. And of course, you think about pens and, you know, all those
like the
standard marketing items, and I'm like, I want to do something different. And I come up with this little tray, and it's multi-purpose. The original intent was just to have either a pick tray, right? So you put your guitar picks and stuff in, or for guys like myself in the shop, what I'm going to do is put a magnet in here. And so when I'm taking a guitar apart and I've got all these small pieces and these little tiny screws, put them in here, and you know, it's just something to hold everything.
Yeah.
But I've shown these to so many people, and women in particular. They're like, they see this and they have a different idea for it. Whether it's rings, earrings, jewelry. I've heard so many different ideas on these, and they just have my logo on them.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, they were cool. But this is where the CNC came in great, because I had to punch out over 100 of these in 2 weeks. Yeah. And so my CNC was going pretty hard.
Yeah. Could you imagine making those all by hand?
Not in 2 weeks. No, that just wouldn't have been possible. And yeah, we just got in an order of guitar picks, and I wanted to try something different. Everybody does the standard, plastic or Delrin pick. Yeah. And so I reached out to a company I knew, actually over in India, and made me some logoed picks, but they're actually made from horn, right? And so the tone is completely different than you would get out of even a Bowen one or, a Delrin or whatever. So it's different for sure. But I asked, I gave him a custom shape, and this bevel was kind of my idea, because I have an issue with dropping picks when I'm playing.
Me too.
Right?
I don't use picks because of that. I always drop it in the hole, and then I can't get it out of my guitar, and I'm shaking the guitar like this trying to get it out.
So yeah, I got him to cut this bevel in here for me, right? And all the picks have this bevel on them. And so I'm pretty interested to see what the musicians think of them when they play them. Yeah. I really like it. I started playing with this just a couple of days ago, because I literally just got them this week. Yeah. And I'm like, I didn't drop it. I didn't lose it, right? Yeah. So it actually fits pretty comfortably in the hand, but it's a fairly thick and stiff pick, as you would imagine. Yeah. But I've also talked to a lot of guys who are really great musicians, and they actually prefer a stiff pick. Mm-hmm. So we'll see how those go.
Yeah. So, well, they look lovely.
Yeah, and I've got some really cool stickers coming too. So anyway, we'll see how this goes. I'll have to
get a sticker from you, because I have my guitar case covered in stickers. Yeah. And I get it from local businesses or anywhere I travel. I'm pretty sure I have a Fourth Meridian one on there.
I've got a cabinet in my shop that is just it's probably 2/3 covered in stickers.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It's just so fun. It's just little collector's items.
Yeah, and these are not they're not just my business cards, as an example, right? They're not a sticker like this by any means. We did order some a little while ago that is just the logo, right? Yeah. But these ones are actually kind of a little bit of kind of like a parlor scene, right? Where it's got a hearth and a fireplace and a guitar and things like that, right? So. Yeah. But anyway, so just trying to come up with some swag, because we're actually taking a trip August this year. We're going to be traveling all the way to Newfoundland and back, and we're going to take a supply of instruments with us, and we're stopping at some retail stores and a few festivals and things like that. And so trying to promote the instruments. And I've got actually one guy in particular from Newfoundland that has reached out to me a few times, and he's looking for a bouzouki. And when he saw mine, he's like, man, I love that thing, but I really would like to try it, right? Mm-hmm. So this is a great opportunity for those people who watch me from all across Canada and want to be able to try these instruments. This is the idea, try and get it into their hands, because let's face it, before the SCMAs, pretty well nobody that was there knew who I was, but everybody who was there now knows who I am, right?
Yeah, and just because they had the opportunity to get to know you, right?
Yeah, again, it's that exposure, right? Creating that brand and right? Getting your name out there.
So now you're going on your national tour.
Well, sort of, I guess, yeah.
I've done that drive from here to Newfoundland and back. Yeah. It's beautiful. It's so nice. Yeah. When my family went, I was 13. And on the way there, we went down through the States and through Chicago and everything to kind of bypass around the Great Lakes. And then on the way back, we went around the Great Lakes in Ontario. And it's beautiful. It's so nice. Yeah. Until it's 6 hours later and you're still driving around the same lake. And it's crazy.
Yeah, I think we've got a plan about 20,000 kilometers we're going to do in a month. Yeah. So it's an awful lot of driving.
Yeah. But it's so worth it. It's so beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. And you're going to meet so many people, and so many more people are going to know about Fireside instruments now.
Here's hoping. So
yeah, that's the best way to network. Cross-country road trip.
Right? Yeah. So, I'm trying to put the word out there. We'll see. Of course, I'm trying to set up dates in different towns and cities and stuff across the way. Yeah. So we'll see how it goes. It's kind of tough to make those connections when it's just kind of a cold call. Yeah. Right? Especially when these businesses don't know me, right?
Mm-hmm. Not yet.
And, well, exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I hope that you have an amazing time on your road trip.
I'm
That's
sure
gonna be
we will.
so much fun. Like, so much fun. Yeah. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. It was awesome. It was awesome getting to know like more about the origins of this and how you kind of got it all up and running and how you do everything. It's really, really interesting.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
Yeah. All right. Well, that concludes the end of our episode, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for episode 3 coming soon.